name is Scott Williams. If this is your first time, I'm the Research and Education Coordinator at the Wisconsin Energy Institute. And the Sustainable Energy Seminar Series is something that we put on every fall and spring, every other Monday at 3:30. And the goal is to bring folks from many different parts of the campus, from engineering and sciences to social sciences and humanities, to give a more comprehensive look at sustainable energy challenges and solutions. This is also a course for students in the undergraduate certificate in engineering for energy sustainability, as well as a master's in sustainable systems engineering. And with this, we're hoping to kind of broaden the scope of people, sort of working outside of the disciplines that the students are studying. We do have this offered both in person and online. We'll post recordings to our YouTube channel, Wisconsin Energy Institute, in a few weeks as well. So if you did miss this one or any other ones, you can check out our YouTube channel for that playlist. We do have live captioning available. I'll turn that on just in case anyone would like that feature. Make sure that closed captioning is disabled on here, not to distract anyone. Okay. Great. So this is actually the last seminar of the spring semester. So we'll start up again in fall and early September. So if you're not on our seminar email list, go to the energy.wis.edu and look for the events page to sign up for the seminar mailing list. We'll let you know when the next seminars are available. If you have a question, we'll go between in the room and online. Feel free to use the Q&A box for any questions for those of you online. With that, I'll introduce our speaker. Dr. Kaiping Chen is an assistant professor in computational communication in the Department of Life Sciences Communication here at UW-Madison. Her research focuses on the intersection of sustainability, computational communication, and diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. She employs data science and machine learning methods, as well as interviews to examine how digital media and technologies affect political accountability to public well-being, and how deliberative designs can improve the quality of public discourse on controversial and emerging technologies. So this is a great segue to the topic of her presentation today. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Scott, for inviting me. And hi, everyone. It's my great.
Let me make sure this is off first. So yours on?
Yeah, mine is off. Can everyone hear me? Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. It's my great pleasure to share my work, which talk about how do we scale up and sustain community engagement in environmental policy making. And I'm going to show you a variety of cases I have been working on, which couple methods in digital crowdsourcing and data sciences with a lot of the in-person engagement that are culturally sensitive. So I want to kind of start by showing you a couple figures. Let me see whether I can get to the next slide. Okay, sure. Okay, cool. So I want to, in the next couple of slides, I want to show you a map from the environmental justice screen by the EPA. And this is a map where I put in Madison. And it gives you a bunch of indicators regarding our environment, regarding social economic status of the city, and also regarding people's food desert. So this is where the first thing we see here is this is a map of the city of Madison or Linn County. And the first indicator I want to show you is about the percentage of people who have low income. And there are two concentrated places on this map. One is kind of like, which is near the university area. The other is near the South Park. So those are the two places where there are more people who are coming from the low income. And let's look at the next indicator. So the next one is people of color. And again, we see that the same two areas are also concentrated with people of color, communities of color. And then the next indicator I want to show you is the particulate matter 2.5. And again, the yellow area represents those places which has a higher concentration. And again, it's the same place, right, near the university area and also the South Park. And then finally, I want to show you is the asthma. the amount of people, percent of people, who are kind of experiencing health issues. And again, it's those two areas, right? And I can show you on and on a bunch of other indicators where we see that a lot of times when we think about environmental issues, it's a policy issue which intersects with people's affordability of living house, people's food security, people's health issues, right? Health matter a lot to environment, and also the intersectionalities of the communities. So a lot of our work in science and environmental communication kind of summarize this type of problem, intersectionality across different areas, right? Across the communities with different demographics. They call this wickedness as the nature of science policy making. So what do we mean by wickedness? So this is where Rittel and Weber, they explain in their 1973 work, say that wicked problems are those problems which have neither of these clarifying traits, and they include nearly all public policy issues, whether the question concerns to the location of a freeway, the adjustment of a tax rate, the modification of school curricula, or the confrontation of crime. So these are all the things which happen in our daily life, matter to us, and they have no clear definition of what is the best solution. So this is where complexity is the nature of this wicked problem, where facts are uncertain, values in dispute, and the stakes are often very high to people's life, and the decisions are very urgent. So when we encounter this type of wicked problem, like environmental justice, right, health and affordable housing, many of the work across our science communication STS study have talked about our deliberative approach to addressing this wicked problem, which means that we need to often engage and interpret different types of knowledge. So this is just a illustration of what do we mean by different types of knowledge. So we need the knowledge from the community members, right, who are impacted by these issues. So we need this on the ground knowledge, people to share their life experiences, community knowledge. So I put people at the center. And then we also need, of course, expertise knowledge, scholars or people who work in this policy area, engineers, designers. And then we also need the policymakers, right? And also NGOs to come in. So it's a kind of like a co-creation process of coming up with the solution, what is best to address this intersectionality problem facing the communities. So there are several constant challenges facing this type of community engagement. So people have done a lot of great work, engaged with the communities in the past, decades. But the first problem is we see that certain communities, they are often constantly being excluded across many community engagement practices. So that's not just in the US, but also in other places. So the question is, what are the inclusive designs to engage those underserved and often under-resourced population into this environmental sustainability policy-making process? How do we engage those who are often underserved and under-resourced? So this is the first kind of the pain issues we want to address when we do community engagement. And the second is many of the community engagement practices, they are often we call short-lived. So you go into the community, do once, right? Scientists go in, but how can we scale up and sustain community engagement? How do we make sure that we can invite people come back again and connect their voices really to the policymakers? So how can we make community engagement sustainable? And then the third kind of the thing is we often have a lot of people come to those community events, both offline and digitally. They share a lot of great ideas, right? So how do we generate, how can we make community input useful for policymaking? How do we think about, how do we integrate community opinions with a lot of the hard data we have about environment health issues to really describe what things, people from which areas, what things do they need? So these are the challenges facing community engagement. And there are several solutions I want to introduce to you from a lot of my work and my collaborators' work. So the first thing is, I want to kind of show you using a case which I've done in the past year to show you what does a culturally responsive deliberation design look like when we talk about we engage the underserved and under-resourced communities. And the second is I want to introduce the concept of digital crowdsourcing, which is a way for scale up, listen to a larger group of community members at a lower cost. So this is where, digital crowdsourcing, I want to also introduce you two types of cases, which I've been working on. And the third is I want to show you a way of data integration, which is a way of how can we connect social, economic, and environment data with the community knowledge and the life experience data. So a little bit of the way I approach community engagement. So my background is I study a lot about science communication, and the theory which inform about my work is democratic theory, particularly the branch of deliberative democracy, which talks about how do we think about what inclusion means, right? What does deliberative design means? How do we empower people in this process for social learning? And then I also use a lot of the data science methods to think about how can we accurately reflect what the community say to us. And then I also kind of work with scholars and practitioners from other disciplines, computer sciences, engineers. So where we really design these digital deliberation tools to engage people to scale up the community engagement. And I have a lot of wonderful partners. So first is community members who coming from those communities are the ones who teach me a lot of lessons. And then I also work a lot with the NGOs and with the local government. And I have worked on cases, when I was in New York City and in Palo Alto, California, and now in Madison. But I also work on cases when I'm in my hometown, Shanghai. So I want to kind of touch upon two issues. First is I want to show you what does inclusion look like, right, in community engagement, and how should we assess its quality and impact. So what do people take away from doing this community engagement, and how does the government, local government, respond to this community engagement exercise? And the second is I want to show you about digital crowdsourcing as a way to scale up and sustainably engage communities. So first is community engagement with a culturally responsive approach. So these are the two events which me and my team are collaborated with two wonderful organizations in Madison, Wisconsin. One is the Wisconsin Eco-Latino, the other is the Urban Triage. So last year, so the goal of this kind of the project is we want to think about how do we amplify and empower Black and Latinx community members in the Dane County to think about, to have a voice in environmental justice issues. And we held two in-person events last October. So one is among about 55 Latino community members, and the other is with about 40 Black community members. So in these two events, the way we kind of like design this like 5-hour events is people discuss about 3 key issues: energy saving at home, extreme heat and health, and the tree canopy and green spaces. And for the Latino events, those participants, when they come to the event, they are randomly divided into 9 small groups. So they chat with their peers, with a moderator, facilitator coming from the communities to talk about what is their life experience look like for these 3 issues. What are the things they need from those kind of 3 things. So this is for the Latino Community Forum. And for the Black Community Forum, we did another different type of style of deliberation. The way we come up with this form of how do we do community events is we ask their NGO leaders, what is the best way to engage their community members about? So they kind of give a lot of suggestions of how to organize this event. So this is where in the Black Community Forum, we choose a style called World Cafe style. So people will have like 6 tables. Each table is about a certain aspect of the issue. And then what the participants is, they shop around, they rotate different tables, they spend 30 minutes at one table, chat with their peers, get a little bit of knowledge, right? Learn a little bit about these issues, how they can, for instance, prevent, help themselves during extreme heat, here. So this is where and then they rotate to the next table to learn about other issues. So just some of the interesting pictures we see here. So this is where like this is a small group setting look like, and we have a facilitator here who is first introducing to the people a little bit about the issues, and then this is how people kind of like in a small group setting discussing these issues. And then on the right side of the picture is very interesting thing is in the Latino Community Forum. The way we do the ice-breaking events to make everybody feel at home, welcome, is a thing you see on there is a map where we ask the participants, which part of the Latino cultures do you come from? And the participants all come in, put the pin on the map, and we see, oh, actually within the Latino community, it's not monopolistic. People have coming from different cultures. And we also have this kind of Mexican dance and food during the whole event. So the kind of the idea is to make people feel comfortable, and feel at home and then learn about what they need for those kind of three issues. And this is who are our participants for the two events. So we see that our participants, are, for instance, for the Latino Community Forum, these are the percentage of participants, like 56% of participants, they don't speak English, they only speak Spanish. So the way we do this event is we provided the material in both English and Spanish. And then the facilitator, if you are in the Spanish speaking small group, everybody speaks Spanish. And we have all the kind of people, note takers, facilitators who speak Spanish. And also we see that, for the Black Community Forum, majority of them, we are aware that they are renters, 90%, they are renters. So this is where a lot of the thing about energy they share with us is they do not have the capacity, they cannot solve these energy issues by themselves. So this is just the demographics of our participants. And then where do our participants live? So we ask about their zip code, right? Where do they live? And we see that from both events, the Black Community Forum and the Latino Community Forum, people are actually from everywhere in the Dane County. So we kind of like cover people, try to make sure they are from all over the places here. And then just some of the ideas, about, I know many of you are doing energy engineering here. So what do people want in terms of energy? How do they want energy use to be improved in their home setting? So this is where we analyze a lot of the things people wrote during the events. And for the Latino Community Forums, many of them talk about those individual behavior and the small personal changes where they can save energy at home by setting the temperature. People share a lot about what temperature they set at home. And then for the Black Community Forum, a lot of things people are mentioned differently from the Latino Forum is they want to see a little bit more about the systematic change, such as the control from the landlord. And then the overlapping idea between what people share are they all talk about renewable energy, improving the home, and they also mention about affordability when we think about those new energy options. And then the next slide is we ask people about, our energy efficient options. If we provide those to you, what are some of your concerns? And then this is the results from the Latino Community Forum. So we see that, across all of our, 40, 50 participants, many of them, the first thing they think about is they probably cannot afford these new energy options. And then some of them tell us that they are unaware of these energy options. And some of them do say that they are aware of the new energy option and can also afford that. So many of the times we see from this is when we tell people about these new energy options, lack of economic and information accessibility are the two key things people pointed out when they think about, or how do we deploy and think about these clean energy options. And in the Latino Community Forum, one way we think about how do we design these education material in the forum is we did a little bit of experiment within the Latino Community Forum to think about what are the education material, how do we give people education material to really make them equal with these issues, make them feel relevant. And we test a bunch of different materials where different groups are exposed to throughout the whole day, 5 hours. So some of the groups are exposed to version A of material, which is more like this one. So we just have printed out a bunch of slides, which provide people only informational facts, tell people, oh, here are the benefits of electrification. So this is the version A material. And then we also tested a bit of material about we call the identity-based storytelling. So in addition to provide these informational facts to people, some of the group, they receive the material where we tell people, we show pictures of the people from their communities. And we also share with them stories about how other Latino homeowners, what do they do in other cities to save the energy. So we add this kind of like story and identity-based, way of trying to engage people. And I'm going to show you some of the interesting finding of how does that, influence people's sense of empowerment differently. So first, this is a graph where we ask people before they come to the event versus after they come to the event. We give them 2 surveys, ask them, how much do you feel aware, right, about different topics we're gonna discuss today? How much do they, feel informed about climate change overall, and how much do they feel informed about the environmental issues in their communities and the neighborhood? And we also ask them a bunch of battery of questions which measure people's empowerment. So by empowerment, which we mean is we can think about kind of different levels. One is empowerment in the sense of I'm aware of this issue. Previously, I don't aware, now I'm aware. But also empowerment means that I now feel that I can have the control, I have the power, I have the agency to take some small action in my life to improve these issues or in my neighborhood. So these are what we tested about a battery of questions about empowerment. And for every figure here on the left side is average across all the participants is a 1 to 7 scale question. Before the event, what is their level right at? And then the second bar is post event. So we see that across all these type of aspects, we see that the participants, they left the event with a significantly larger increase in terms of how much they become more aware of the issue, how much they feel they learn right through these social learning practices, and also how much they actually increase their empowerment, particularly in terms of the awareness aspect. And this is just a regression model where, again, all of the dependent variable are those things which regarding how much you feel informed and how much you are aware of the issue and how much you feel a sense of empowerment. And on each of the row here we control for people's demographics, right? They are answer to the pre-survey questions regarding these are things, the language people speak. And then in the block 4 is which group those people belong to. They belong to the group where the base condition is they only are exposed to education material which tell them informational facts, very boring, right? Those kind of like slides, versus they are in the identity-based narrative or identity-based visual narrative. So basically, they are exposed to material all day with those storytelling about people from the communities, from their similar communities. And what we see here is for those people who are exposed to storytelling, those type of education material, actually they feel even more empowered, more informed about climate change issues compared to the people who are only exposed to the informational facts. So kind of the thing we find here is everybody is learning, right? Quite very good about environmental issues. They feel empowered, they feel more aware. And also we see that those who are exposed to those storytelling way of talking about environmental issues, they left it forward, even get more empowered. So this is where I'm coming up back to the point of what do we mean by this kind of culturally responsive way of thinking about, when we do this community engagement. So the first is when we do this exercise, we really ask our NGO partners, our Black and Latino NGO partners, what are the way we should design this event to make people really openly and comfortably share their opinion. And also another thing is we see that the material you can provide it to people during the event. So you don't ask people come to just chat without giving them any basic knowledge of their issue. You need to give people some of the education material, but the way you design education material matters a lot. And we see here a very useful strategy is to use storytelling and use storytelling from the communities they are familiar with. This can actually make people more empowered and aware of these issues. And also, what we see is we think about when we do this community engagement, right? So how does the local government respond to these events? So the local government, the Dane County office, and also the city of Madison mayor's office, they are sustainability unit. So they are actually very supportive of these events. So for instance, this is where the Cassie who is the director from the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change. So she came to the October BOST event, sit there, listen to what the people say. And then she also get onto the stage to address questions with the community members. And after the event, actually, she immediately posted a post talking about these environmental justice conversations, about how, she think about, she hear the people and some of the things she will think about moving forward to address these issues. And this is another event we held where Jessica, from the city, she is actually giving feedback to the community members in March, just the last month, where she talked about, oh, this is what we heard from you last October. And here are a bunch of things we are taking to address your needs. We want to collect further feedback. So this is a March 4th follow-up dialogue between the city and the county officers with the community members who attended our last October's forum. So this is a process we are working together, still going on, where we want to make sure that we build a connection between community members and the local government officials to amplify people's voices really into the environmental justice policy making. So this kind of community events is really wonderful, right? We see that people learn a lot from each other. And then the local officials, they also learn a lot from what the Black and Latino communities, what they want. It's a great learning practice, right? So then the next question is, how can we do it every year? Or more frequently, more regularly, because these events are very costly. We need to compensate the participants. We also need to, add staff capacity to the NGOs, people who help us in this whole process. So how do we make it? How do we sustain this type of community engagement to continuously, give feedback to the community members, right? Serve as the bridge to bring local government, NGOs, and the community members together to addressing these environment problems. So this is where I want to show you first a deliberative system of how I think about how can we create the link between community engagement and policy responsiveness. And I want to show you a case about digital crowdsourcing. What does it look like and how maybe you can apply that in your future work. So this is where it's a framework of how we think about how can we couple in diverse communication modalities, data science, and policy responsives, how we put them together in a deliberative system to empower people's voices in policy making. So on the left, let's see, on the very left side is we call community input, right? We need to learn from the communities. And when we learn from the different communities, it's really important we have different modality provided to people. So what we mean by different modality is some people love to come to these community events in person, right? So then we invited to come to these in-person events. But some other people, they are really super busy. They don't have the time to really come to the events, or they have, kind of things, other things need to take care of. So they can also participate digitally, or they can send a text message. So we want to think about a variety of ways to learn from community ideas. So this is really important that when we collect the community input, we want to provide these diverse options available to people. And then once we collect this community input from this different diverse modality, so the next thing which you see here is we call the data automation and the analytics warehouse. So these consist of a bunch of tools where we are able to extract what are the key concepts, key themes people talk about from what they share about these things. And so we need a bunch of our data analytic tools, such as, for instance, we draw a lot from computer science tools like natural language processing, and also like computer vision, where people share us with images. And then the third step is visualize community input. So many of the times we work with NGOs and local government, we can't just give them a bunch of statistics, right? We want to kind of show them vividly what do people say. So these are just some of the ways I'm going to show you later on. Again, the way we visualize community input. For instance, we want to show our client about, oh, these are the map of the city of Madison. When you click into each region, what do people who come from those regions, what their opinions are? And then you click into that, you can show them, oh, here are a bunch of different themes people talk about. And here are the subcategories, sub-themes of what people say. So this is where visualize community input. And then this is where it can provide, the goal, right, is to provide, policy recommendation where the local officials can learn about, oh, what are some of the things they can do to give feedback to these communities. And then we go back to this process where we collect further community feedback on the revised policy making. So again, it's a very iterative process. And so this is a kind of like what we think about a deliberative system look like. Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, good question. I mean, what do you do with community members that don't have access to the internet?
Could you repeat that for the online?
Yes, so Jonathan asked an amazing question. So what do we do? How do we deal with people? How do we engage people who doesn't have the internet access, right? So this is where it's very important. For instance, in the community input, this is why we need to diversify the mode. For instance, in-person events. The reason we kind of like we say, when we talk about scale up and sustain, it's not about we do everything digitally. We still need to do community events. Many of the people, like the NGOs, they actually knock on people's door to ask people to come to share opinion. So this is where when people don't have the internet access, we want to hear from them. We need people to go walk into the neighborhoods to do survey, across them. So this is where it's really, really important when we think about how do we collect the community input. We first need to provide a diverse options. And how do we know what option people want? We often ask a survey of people who come to the in-person events. For example, we ask them, if we want to do a follow-up event, which mode do you want? Is most convenient for you? And some of people say, I want to do in-person event. Again, I want to have the Mexican food and dance. But some people say, actually, do you have some digital way? Or can you just do some surveys, in-person survey, or distribute survey at community events? So this is where I think it's really a great question of why we need to diversify the mode. Is because some people don't have internet access, some people don't have the time, and sometimes people just, their preference is to share opinion more comfortably during the in-person events. Yeah. So this is where, going back to some of the points Jonathan mentioned in the next slide is, before we do any digital engagement, there are many activities we need to do before the digital engagement. So the first is we need to work a lot with the community NGOs to develop the right questions to consult the community. It's not that researchers pop from their head what you ask the communities. It's we need to consult our NGO and also community member, what are the things they want to share about. So for the way to ask a question, define the problem, we need to, to consult a lot with the NGO members. And then the second is, we need to identify the digital divide subpopulation. And for those population, we need to use other non-digital methods to learn about their opinions. So there are these exercises before we do any kind of digital engagement. And then the kind of the methodology I want to introduce is, we call this way of digital crowdsourcing. So what do we mean by digital crowdsourcing, right? A lot of the entities, not just the local government, some of the NGOs, some of the companies, they're also using this way of what we call digital crowdsourcing. So in terms of the local government, when they do digital crowdsourcing, it means that it is an open government practice is actually adopted not just in the US, also in the Europe and sometimes also in the South America. So we can think about broadly is the local government, they use digital tools, website, apps, SMS to collect large scale input from communities. And the reason many of the times, the value of we do this digital crowdsourcing throughout the public policy making process is, of course, it's going to add epistemic value, right? You want to learn information from the community, right? We talked about at the beginning, community knowledge, communities' living experiences and needs really matter. So this is where it's the informational value. And it also has democratic value where the government can make it more transparent to the community member in terms of how they make policies, how they make the budget. So by bringing them together to have this dialogue, it actually increases democratic governance. And the third is the economic value in terms of digital crowdsourcing. It is often less costly compared to organize those very big events. And you can do multiple rounds, online. So, and this kind of digital crowdsourcing, it can be applied across the public policy cycle. So this is just a graph where we show that, what time will you use the crowd to crowdsource their ideas? You can do that at the defining problem stage where you don't even know what are the problem facing people in terms of energy saving. You can also do when you are developing policy options. You have different options and you don't know which option the community wants. So you consult the crowd. And then you can also do that in your policy evaluation stage where you implemented the existing policy, but you don't know how it is work on the ground, what people like or doesn't like. So you can also do crowdsourcing in the evaluation stage. So this is actually a method which you can do at a different kind of public policy making cycle. And this is one of the digital crowdsourcing, the city of Palo Alto did. And Lon Peterson was the communication manager for the city of Palo Alto at that time. We did a crowdsourcing in 2015. And he pointed out what's the difference between listening to the people online versus what they usually do in those town hall meetings, where he said that when we got feedback on the original comprehensive plan last time, people came, maybe 50 to 100 people. So he was referring to the common practice, traditional practices of holding town hall meeting. 50, 100 people come. Since we've done it digitally, the first element in the policy already received 350 comments. We've far eclipsed the amount of engagement by using digital tools, and especially enhancing those tools to get down to allow a more granular way to comment on something. So he pointed out that it allows people to actually provide them with more nuanced opinion to give policy suggestions. So this is how it looks like for the digital crowdsourcing website in the city of Palo Alto. So it looks like an open town hall where they ask people, they post those topics, and we see that some of the people come to visit and leave comments. So for the digital crowdsourcing in 2015, they created something called a digital commenter. So this is where they want to collect people's idea about, for instance, what do you think about the draft transportation element in the city's comprehensive plan? And they provided with people two options, quick commenter and extended commenter. So for the quick commenter, you can think about it's more like they have a bunch of questions, open-ended question, they want to ask people's thoughts. And then for the extended commenter is they actually pull up the whole policies, every policy item to the crowd, and they want people to comment on each policy, and the people can also have dialogue with each other. So for instance, this is where they put up their policy document together, and we see that people can click that bubble to leave the comments of how they want to revise these policies. And there are some of the interactive designs on this digital commenter which facilitate these virtual discussions between the policymaker and the communities. So for instance, they have the tab called all the ideas they collected from the crowd. And then they also have the outcome where they want to tell people after we hear from you, what are the outcomes from this local policy making after we hear from you. And then people can also comment with each other. So for instance, once you click into the bubble to comment on a policy, and then we see that other people, other community members, they will respond to each other about how they think about how we can revise certain policy items. So it also allows a social learning among the crowd, among the community members. So this is where, what we did is we're looking into what does the crowd say on the left side. And then the Citizen Advisory Committee, this is just a small group of our self-selected citizens who participate in this process through in-person meetings. And then the right side is the policy changes. So actually the local government shared with me about a Word track changes, Word document, what policy they added, what policy they deleted. So I look into what things they really changed. And what we can see that many of the times, the community members, they talk a lot of things about the resources on the ground, They want to change traffic calming measures. They want to think about how can we create regional transportation systems connecting South Bay. And then the Citizen Advisory Committee, those group of people, they talk a lot about resource management, like, oh, we need to set up a council, we need to set up a management PTC to deal with these issues on the ground. And then if we look at the policy changes, many of the times the government is talking about, oh, how can we designate certain tasks to redistribute resources back to answer those communities. So this is one way where we try to look at how does the process from the digital crowd, how does it go through the process finally to the policy changes. So a lot of the values created through the crowdsourcing is community solutions and opinions. Yes, it brings new information to the local government, but it also creates a feedback loop, right, between the policymakers and the community members. And also it informs community members about various environmental issues. Sometimes are quite technical. They learn from their other community members regarding what is happening on the ground. What are some of the practices they can learn from other neighborhoods to address these issues? So it's also a social learning among the community members. And then the current digital crowdsourcing practice we are doing, it's ongoing, actually happening this month and the next month is, we already did many wonderful community engagement events last October, this March. So this is where me and my wonderful collaborator at School of Information, what we are doing is we are building a digital website. So this is the front page of the digital website we built, is where we want to scale up to hear Black and Latino communities in the Dane County regarding issues such as, again, urban heat, energy saving, air quality issues. So we created a tab called Local Government and Me, want people to share their opinions. And then there is a second tab called Environmental Justice, where we want people share stories. They can take video, they can take image about how environment influence their lives. And the third tab we create is we kind of provide a lot of list of useful information to tell people how do you monitor the air quality at your neighborhoods? How do you use the IRA credit to get tax credits for any of the energy efficient options we are doing? So this is more like a resource learning tab we are working on. And this is just a one kind of engagement tools we incorporated into the design called social map. So in the social map, for instance, when we want to ask people about, oh, what does the green space, what trees, how many green spaces you need, where in the communities, so people can just put in their address onto the map here. And then once they enter the address, they can pinpoint a location here, and then they can annotate this pinpoint, say something like, oh, how many trees I need here? What type of tree do I need? How do I think about the green spaces issues? So we created this social map where people can give us a location and tell us what they need. And it's the same for the air quality sensor deployment and also for the urban heat, how much they are experiencing. So social map is one tool we deploy on this platform where we want people to share us about where they live. It's all place, a lot of times place-based kind of experiences and what they want. So this is where it's the people in their tab of environmental justice, where we provided people different options. They can tell us about their stories, share their ideas, for instance, shape environmental responses. So we give people a bunch of prompts and ask them, what are the most urgent problems they face in terms of environment in their life, so they can share their stories. And we also have these options asking people to rank what are the most urgent environmental justice problems facing them. So we create, again, a variety of types of questions, ways for people to engage on this digital platform. So finally, once we collect all of this data, right, how do we envision, how do we integrate the different types of data together? So again, this is the map which we show, in the very beginning, right? We know that for the neighborhood, the different neighborhoods, here are the percentage of people who have low income. Here are the people of color, particulate matter stats, and we also know the asthma rate. So we have all this environment health related data. And what we need is really about people's voice. What do people say, right? So this is just a simple analysis which we did using n-gram analysis. So it's a method in natural language processing. So this is where we ask our participants to write a lot of things. We have a preset of questions. We ask people during the in-person events and during the online digital crowdsourcing. And then what we did here is we also ask people where they live. So we have the zip code, have their home address. So this allows us to link where they live with what they say. And there are different kind of stats regarding neighborhood characteristics. The privation score is an indicator developed by a bunch of scholars at the University of Michigan. So they tell us about, what is the neighborhood look like? We can also use the EPA data, right, in terms of the environmental stats, health stats of different neighborhoods. And then because we know where those participants live, and then what we can link is to what they say. So for instance, this is where it's a map from what our Black community members, what are the most frequently words they mention in their written notes. So many of them say that they care a lot about air. They care a lot actually about the water quality is a key issues they raised again and again. And they also talk about, they want to think about the cooling centers. They need those things during the extreme heat. And then this is another map where we use the bigrams where we, compared to the previous one, it's just one word, right? But we also want to see what phrases people mention. So for instance, people mention a lot about save money. They want a cooling center. They care a lot about save money when they think about these environmental options. And then they also talk about green space and a clean air. And this is where the Latino community members say things which are a bit differently from the Black community members. So for the Latino community members, two kind of key things, two kind of phrases that appear a lot across what they wrote. One is electric stove. They are thinking about these electrification issues. And the second is many people write words like no program. So they have a lot of informational requests regarding, please tell us what are the existing options regarding energy efficiency, regarding how to prevent ourselves from extreme heat. So they want to know these programs existed in the neighborhoods and the city to handle these issues. And then the final goal we can think about is how do we finally visualize and automate, right, these community input. So for instance, we can have different locations, right, on the map. And then what we can do is, we can build a dashboard where we can analyze people's sentiment when they talk about these issues, right? Sometimes we want to know a little bit about people's emotion when they share about these issues. And then we can also have these, what we call the citizen concept occurrences. So these are the ways where you can think about, it's like the graph I showed before. What are the key words, key themes people mention when they talk about these issues? And we can also have, different categories when we do theme analysis in terms of transportation. In the Palo Alto case, what are the different ways regarding transportation people want to think about? People talk a lot about public transit, private transit. They talk about other big picture infrastructure. And then we can even take a deep dive into each of the categories to look at what are the other subcategories, let's say within the public transit, people raise suggestions about. So we can go deeper and deeper to get granularity of what the people want and needs. And again, we link what people say to the neighborhood's characteristics they are situated at. So just to summarize what we learned here. So when we think about a deliberative system for addressing these constant challenges in community engagement, we first talk about that when we think about environmental policy making or sustainability policy making, they often need to deal with wicked problems that cuts across actually multiple policy domains. And this is where it's really important to increase the coordination efforts among different agencies rather than working in each siloed spaces. And it's also important when we do these community engagement events, right? It's important for us to think about how can we do it in a culturally responsive and racial equity lens to engage the often underserved and under-resourced populations. And then we introduce one way when we think about scale up and sustain community engagement. So digital crowdsourcing is a practices where local government, NGO members, they can build this digital platform. And there are many existing services already available. So you can use the template to engage and respond, right? Create this feedback loop with a larger group of community members. And the third is, how do we make this community input really become useful for policymakers, and going back to the community to tell them what we learn from these social learning practices. This is where data integration is really very important. It's not just to tell the community members what are people say they need, what resources they need, but to tell who are the people that need those resources, which neighborhood they come from. And this will allow us to really deepen our understanding about how environment disparity occur across communities. And it also allows us to really think about a multimodal approach for thinking and addressing about environmental issues, not only from those numeric indicators we already have, but also from the public opinion data, really those very nuanced things people share and write during the community engagement in both offline and digital methods. So I very much look forward to hear your suggestion, comments, and feedback. Thank you so much.
Start with questions.
I was interested in the EPA zones that you identified as being low income and also having more health problems. And I was wondering, looking at the map, it occurred to me that the top zone, the northern zone, probably is in the area where there were 3 coal power plants, one on the isthmus and a couple associated with the university more on the southwest side. And then the lower part, I think there's an incinerator for plastic and other kinds of waste sort of off the Chantry Road. I was wondering if there's been any association with those health issues and those particular entities or plants and so forth, and also whether the public was aware of the relationship, if that's the case.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I think, you asked a really great question. So when we look at the EPA map, right, or we see the northern parts and we also see the southern part is actually having a lot of, environmental problem like waste or air pollution, those issues. And so the first is, are the public aware of those things? And we actually, ask those community members who come to our events, and many of them, particularly among the Latino community members, they tell us that waste management, air pollution is a key issue they face. And this is why, we provide in the digital platform, we ask people on map, tell us where you live. What is happening? What is the thing you observe in your environment? What is the infrastructure there? We ask those people, and how are you experiencing that? So this is where, the kind of thing is EPA map. It's a wonderful thing, right? But it still has a lot of gaps in terms of what is people happening on the ground. For instance, even for the low income, the reason you see on the northern part is many of them are university students. So this is why the income is very low. And this is actually a question community member raised to the local officials, say some of the maps doesn't reflect what is happening on the ground. It doesn't really touch the Latino communities or the Black communities. So this is where we want to, one of the ways is we want to let people share what they observe to augment, to complement those kind of the bigger map we see from the EPA.
There's also, the last few years ago, I signed up for the US Census listserv, and so I haven't really delved into it deeply, but they have, I guess maybe the new management of the census data, they really do an incredible amount of data crunching and all kinds of different kinds of maps, and it's very interesting. And I wondered if you had been using some of that data, or if that's integrated as the EPA data, or what. Or it's really an incredible resource, and maybe it might actually tease or go in deeper than the EPA. I don't, or maybe it's inside the EPA. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for the next step we are doing after we finish this digital crowdsourcing is one kind of map source we are using is the EPA, but we also found other kind of the US federal agency. They actually provide a bunch of better indicators compared more comprehensive indicators compared to EPA. So this is where kind of one thing for us researchers is before we even do digital crowdsourcing, ask people questions. We want to know how do they define how do they do the census tract. Like for instance, we can't just ask people zip code. We need to ask people their home address. So this is where we actually get a little bit understanding of what they are mapped, what is the census tract look like, and what things we need to ask people in terms of their demographic neighborhood in order to connect back to those maps. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Jonathan.
So along those same lines, how much identifying information do you have from everyone that participates online? I want to know about accountability. Could you get bad data coming in if people are anonymous? How is there accountability in the data that comes in?
Yeah, that's really a very great question. So I think we did two ways to, I think, Jonathan, you asked two questions. One is about the representation. How do we know who those crowds are, right? And the second is how do we kind of try to get better quality information? How do we know what they tell us is true or something, right? So the first question about representation. So the way we did that is everybody, they participated anonymously using the username. But when they get onto our online website, when they sign up the account, we ask their email address, first, last name, home address. So we ask this bunch of information. And how do we know it is correct? Because those are all the participants recruited by our two NGOs. So the two NGO members know those people. This is where they give the stipend back to those people. So we kind of link, I think this is where the two wonderful NGO here helps a lot to ensure that we know the demographics of those people they come from. And the second thing is we also show people, online, what are some of the ways we would like their feedback. So for instance, we wanted to encourage them, we give them some prompts of what things regarding environment justice, which can, we would love to hear. So we kind of add those kind of prompts to the people to share their ideas to make sure the quality is very high. Yeah, but I also want to, echo back to those things about what about the people share false information, right? They make up something, and this is a problem. I think it's so for me as a researcher, how do I say? It's first on this platform there are moderation policy, there are moderation systems. We need to be respectful to other people when they make comments online. But then, really, what is a good quality of data? As long as people don't just say something of, hi, I agree, hello, thank you. They make some suggestions, then we think it's providing useful information to us. And the way we can do is, because we know their demographic background. So when we present our data, when we think about what people need, we link their demographics, neighborhood characteristics with what they say. So when we kind of try to present.
I guess there's a few questions online that sort of touched on some of the responses already. So first question from early was, is there an analysis of demography of those participating in the digital interactions, maybe more broadly? I think the concern is some voices might be overrepresented over others. And then similarly, how do you guard against the interaction becoming negative or the spread of misinformation?
I think so. For the first question is, in terms of how for the digital crowd, how do we know who they are, right? And how do we? I think this kind of touch 2 points. So the first is we can't just share what people say without telling the local government who they are. So this is why we ask their demographic questions when they sign up for the platform. So this is where how we know that who they are compared to the census data, let's say in Wisconsin or in the Dade County. So this is where we show the representation in terms of different demographic, gender, race, ethnicity, different things compared to what is the general population in Wisconsin. We have this data, we're gonna show that. And then the second is, how do we prevent the spread of misinformation and false information on this digital platform? I think this is a very interesting question, and I would think about this way. So first is we have a kind of how do we make sure people respond to each other respectfully? So the first is we have on the digital website, we have this kind of like community guidelines, try to ask people to be civil to each other. And then this is a different, I want to say this is a different setup compared to social media. Our setup is more about, we want to listen to you, to share your opinion about the environment. And we build this type of digital website, try to let you share your voice, rather than just on the social media where people bully each other. So we have a different setup there. And in terms of the misinformation, I won't say like, we haven't collected data yet, but I think what we can do is, we want to show this all the type of information to the local government, and we want to let them to think about what information they want to take, rather than our researcher try to identify what people say is true or wrong. In this type of cases, we want to go back to the NGOs and go back to the community members. So this is where after we finish this type of digital crowdsourcing, right? It's not kind of the end. There are many of the post-digital crowdsourcing activity we need to do. One of the key activity we want to do is, here are the information people share. And we go back to the community members, go back to the NGO members to ask them, do this information accurately reflect what you are thinking about? So we're gonna have this kind of post-engagement process to make sure that what thing we capture really reflects what their needs are. Yes.
One thing I was wondering is, it sounds like you're developing this software platform as part of your research project, but will eventually, if you feel like it's looks like it's been yielding a lot of very useful information, it's beneficial and empowering the community and so forth, helping policy makers and government understand what might be needed, and they're responsive to it. So it's pretty exciting. But do you foresee making this available more broadly so that other kinds of communities can make use of it?
Yeah, exactly. I think so. The kind of like the plan we are having is, so my collaborator, wonderful scholar Corey Jackson from the School of Information. So he is taking a lot of the lead on designing this digital website and doing a lot of the knowledge mapping. And our plan is, currently the website is only to the people who are recruited by our NGO partners. But later on, we definitely want to first share our findings using those visual maps to the broader public. So we want to let the broader public, in Wisconsin or beyond, know what the Black and Latino community's voices are. So we want to use that website as our education kind of like tool for the broader public. So this is where we can think about, it's a broader public education tool. And then the second is some of the work we are working on doing a lot is, we are creating this digital website. The end goal is to let community members, NGOs, local government use that rather than always in the researcher's hand. So how do we think about technology transfer from say this 1 year project or 5 year project to finally the technology transfer back to the community members? So this is where what we are doing, thinking about doing is, we are applying for more funding. And the role of applying for those funding is, we want to, do a lot of the training workshop among those NGO leaders, among the local government, of how they can use this digital website. And also this digital website, it is where there's a company called the Social Pinpoint. They already have those type of nice templates. And we don't need a lot of called programming entry to do this digital website, but we want to do more training with the stakeholders we serve with to see, how can they make it useful to them? How can they, in future, without researchers, they can also use that themselves to do that. Yeah. This is our final goal, but for me, I'm fully aware that community engagement, what we are doing is just the very beginning step, is to hear people from in person, doing it the website, but really to make it sustainable. It's not just a 1 year we can finish all this process, and it needs kind of more like 4 or 5 years to continuously make people feel empowered. And also during those 4 to 5 years, we're also gonna constantly think about how can we train the community leaders to use technology. Maybe it's the website, maybe it's their social media website, right? Because many of the time you tell us that some of the things we are working on can be incorporated into their Instagram, Facebook account. So if this is the way they want to go about digital engagement, we will do the training for them about this way. So we will think about broadly of what we mean by digital crowdsourcing. It's not just use certain website, it's all the way they can use digital technology to talk to the people, to invite people to hear the people. Yes.
Can you speak to how the conversation began between your group and Urban Triage and the other community partners, and a little bit maybe about the timeline of when you started talking about collaborating with them?
Yeah, so I think you asked a great question. How does this conversation collaboration started, right? I think maybe Gavin Lucer is also in the Zoom meeting. So yeah, so our University Alliance is a wonderful organization on campus. So this is where, you know, the managing director, Gavin Lucer there, you know, he and I know a lot of the work, did some of the work together actually with Jonathan when we did the COVID-19 pandemic, you know, work together. And he introduced me to the NGO partners and to the local government. So I think University Alliance, they serve a critical role, bringing faculty members. They are the trustworthy entity, do a lot of wonderful work. So they bring me to talk to the community members. And also another organization which is very wonderful in facilitating this project is the South Madison Partnership. So they provide the venue first for us to do these events. And also the director there, the staff member there also give us a lot of suggestions to do this work. And also a lot of times for me, the collaboration, this partnership initiated from community events. So for instance, I love going to community events, and this is how I meet many of the NGO partners and the leaders.
We do have a few questions online. I know we're over time, so I don't know how many more minutes you have to answer a few more questions. Are you okay staying for a little bit more time?
Oh, sure, yeah, I'm happy.
If you need to leave, that's totally fine. So one question from Todd was whether you feel this is best applied just to kind of local community level, or can this be scaled up maybe to the state legislature level?
Yeah, so this is really an excellent question. So they are, so when we think about, for instance, this is definitely first, it's not a local level thing. We can scale up to the state level and also even to the federal level. So I was actually giving a similar talk in January to the EPA. And they are very interested in these practices. Many of their state level government, the federal level government, justice issue, equity issues at their center, and they want to do community engagement. If we think about in-person events, then we want to make sure to bring so many people into the room. But for the digital website, I think this is where a way for us to think about scale up to the state level, to the federal level. They can use a very similar website to learn about what people across different places, across different counties in the state think about these environmental issues. Or if it's a federal agency, they can also incorporate part of the digital website design into their existing equity tool, screening tool, to ask people's opinion. So this is where I would definitely think about, you know, the digital tool is a way to scale up to different government levels.
And then another way of sort of applying this, have you attempted to apply it more in a rural setting where they might have different, you know, concerns such as clean water in rural communities? Have you attempted that, or do you foresee, you know, application in that aspect?
Yeah, this is where, you know, many of the people who came to our events, I think they are more, you know, located in kind of the urban area. But I think actually rural area is really a way we want to do the next step. And this go back to some of the questions asked before is when we go to the rural areas, maybe digital is not the correct way. And then we want to do this type of in-person events. And actually, this is where the UW extension, there are a lot of wonderful people who are doing environmental outreach, rural development there, who want to do this type of environmental outreach to the rural area. So I definitely foresee this is a very vibrant next step, you know, to collaboration.
And then question from Kermit was about, you know, there's a lot of interest and the biggest challenge is really kind of the resources and know-how to afford to do so. So what are your thoughts on addressing kind of the resource, the, you know, financial issues of putting this platform and this work together?
I think in terms of the financial things, there are two things which I learned from this project and also many of the activity I do is, so the first is for doing this kind of activity, community engagement, it's really, really critical that me as the researchers, I apply for funding to support the NGOs to do this kind of recruitment. So I give NGOs as much as money as I can. I continuously apply for a variety of fundings, federal level philanthropy foundation, and also internal funding to continue supporting the NGO staff members. And also, of course, the community member, like the community member who come to our October event, everybody get a $100 gift card. So we give people, because we really want to make sure it's, which value their voices a lot. And we also provided the childcare during the event, during the Latino Community Forum. And the second, regarding the financial thing is, if we always do in-person events, it's gonna be very costly. But the way we do digital events, it's relatively less costly, not just about the value, but it's all about the different type of logistics of how you organize these events. So the digital way is much easier for people to participate.
I'm from the UW Madison, faculty emeritus, but I live in rural Wisconsin now. So I'm interested in the question about the water quality. In fact, I referred to this talk to a number of people out there. So anyway, I'm working with the UW Extension Water Quality, Water Action Volunteer that's checking out water streams. And so I think that and this relates to agriculture, which is prevalent in the way we do agriculture, whether soil is eroding into the water systems. So so I thought this was a very interesting talk because I think we have to engage the farming community, and how do we do that? Get them to want to make changes in their practices.
Yeah, that's really amazing because the end goal of when we think about empowerment, social learning is one way about empowerment, right? Informational empowerment is shared knowledge. But actually the fundamental, the end goal of this type of community engagement is to create economic empowerment. So for instance, people come here, they learn more about the type of job they can apply for in terms of green job, or they learn about those practices which can strengthen their economy, agricultural practices. So this is something we are thinking about what we mean by turn people's awareness into action. The final goal is to economic or workforce development. And we should talk more about the work we do.
I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your presentation, for sticking around.
Thank you.